Thank you. Thank you. Can you? No. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hello? Okay, fine. So, hello. Thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, Amaze, first of all, for having us. As we said, we are a small game design studio from Milan, Italy, called We Are Müesli, and we mostly make story-driven games. We used to say that they are meant for narrative, culture, arts and design, and history lovers. And here are a few key numbers from our track record from our previous projects. Like this number here, 7,390, is the number of words that we put in our first game, art game DEUS VIDET, which was an art-fi visual novel about the works of Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch. Another impressive number, 58,145, was the number of characters, not counting spaces, I guess, of Venti Mesi, which is another narrative game that we made a couple of years ago, telling the story of Italian resistance during World War II. And final key number, 2,672, is the number of dialogue lines, which was our contribution to this game, narrative racing game, Wheels of Aurelia by Santa Ragione. But today we want to focus on another number, which is this one, and 4 is the number of syllables that we actually put in the game that we are actually showcasing here at Amaze. And the title of the game, hopefully the audio works, is this one.
Sihiyuan.
There's no audio.
Sihi.
Oh, okay, no. Can we have a bit of volume? Okay, anyway, because there was a video here actually pronouncing the title of the game the right way. It's a Chinese title. It's a Sihiyuan. Hopefully I pronounced it the right way, which is Chinese.
Sihiyuan.
Okay, there is.
Sihiyuan.
Okay.
Sihiyuan.
Okay. Enough. So Yuan, it's the title of the game that we are showcasing here, and it's a game that deals with a country that we deeply love, which is China. It was actually originally conceived as an installation for an exhibition during Beijing Design Week 2015. Dear friend of ours, Italian architect Fabrizio Gurrado, who's living and working in Beijing, China, was having this exhibition dealing with Yuan, which means courtyard in Chinese. It's a specific traditional architectural layout of Chinese historical courtyards, and which we can see represented, here. So these kind of courtyards were composed of a courtyard in the middle, which was a communal space that was shared between 4 houses and 4 families living around this shared space in between. The nice thing was that the exhibition was actually hosted in one of these courtyards, which is a pretty serious architectural issue for the city of Beijing these days, because people who were used to live in these beautiful shared spaces nowadays end up living in places like this, totally alienating skyscrapers in the suburbs of Beijing. So Fabrizio asked us if we wanted to contribute to his exhibition with some sort of game installation, and we totally loved the idea, but as we had previously mainly dealt with as we said, narrative-driven projects, heavily text-based, as we saw from the numbers, we realized that we had a big problem, which was this one, the cultural and the language barrier that we were facing, and this big challenge that we were facing for actually showcasing a game in Beijing. So we kind of tried to sum up the ingredients of the design brief that we were that we were given, which was, as I said, tackling this architectural issue of CA1, overcoming the language and cultural barriers for a game meant for an exhibition in China, and as I said, work as an on-site installation. The fact is that most of the real CA1 are best case scenario preserved in a way like this. So they're turned into some kind of gentrified hotels or restaurants or design places that totally change the social function that these spaces had. So we tried to make some research, found that this notion of CA1 has already been tackled and expressed. We found examples of CA1 made of Legos. There are reconstructions of CA1 in Minecraft, but we felt that they were kind of missing this special thing that we actually encountered in first person while spending a couple of months in Beijing, and the fact that Chinese people and people from Beijing they leave the common spaces in a beautiful way. They're able to turn even the smallest garden closed between like highways into a beautiful venue, for instance, for playing ping pong together, or for playing also any kind of games, like for instance playing mahjong in the streets. These are just a few pictures of people sharing spaces. And this idea of sharing and this idea of collaborating and creating some bond between people was already an issue that we had tried to explore with some previous projects of ours, like this prototype that we made a couple of years ago, We'll Meet Again, which was a two-player cooperative puzzle novel, which was all based on human and verbal communication, what happens beyond the screen. So back to our brief. We tried to focus on the shape of this space that, as I said, was comprised of one communal area plus 4 individual areas. So back to our brief, we thought that a possible solution for actually getting to the design of the experience was to sum up all these ingredients into a 4 players, so kind of reproducing this social experience, abstract, in order to overcome the language barrier that I mentioned, local cooperative game. So first thing we did was finding the perfect collaborator for a project like this. This is a picture from Indicated Showcase 3 years ago. And this guy here, Aran Koering, which is a young and very talented Dutch game maker. We totally loved the kind of things that Aran makes, which are these crazy, weird, often social experiences. And so we had our team for actually tackling and making this game here. And in design, there is this notion of perfect design objects, like a compass is a perfect design object. You cannot design a better object for actually drawing a circle. And thinking about abstraction and abstract games, first game that we thought of was obviously Tetris, which is a perfect, it's basically what a compass is for product design, is an example of what abstract game design is for games. And I don't know, not so many people know that the first actual sequel of Tetris was by Alexei Pajitnov, so it was the official sequel to Tetris, was this game here, Weltris, that kind of reproduced the 2D dynamics and mechanics of Tetris in this sort of 2D visualization of a 3D space where blocks were falling along the sides of this well, and you could like move them along the four sides of this well. And we realized realized how somehow this design was pretty similar to the layout of the original CUN that I showed you before. So the very first draft of how the game design of CUN, the game, could work was something like this. Probably that day, Claudia, which is in charge of all the art and the visual in our games, was probably away. I don't know. I made this super rough visualization using Excel. I kind of suck with the visuals. But the idea was somehow to reproduce the layout of CUN into the layout of the game. So communal area in the middle and 4 individual areas on the 4 sides of the center square. We decided, first of all, to reduce the complexity of having actual like Tetris-like blocks into turning into single tiles, and tiles of different colors, and we found another perfect ingredient and inspiration for the color of the tiles into the Chinese theory of colors that has a specific orientation that relates each color to north, south, west, and east coordinates, giving different meanings to these 4 different colors. But we felt that we kind of still needed some context and some feeling, a subtle Chinese, I would say, mood to the game. Getting back to some previous works of ours, Claudia, especially as our game artist, is fascinated with textures and patterns. That's something that we had already explored with another game of ours, the Great Palermo, which is entirely based on patterns and graphic textures. And Mahjong actually already mentioned that it's all about these decorations and these very nice patterns. And the same goes for masks for the Chinese, for the Beijing opera. So that's how we came up with these decorations for the tiles, providing this subtle context related to China for the overall mood of the game. And I'm quickly going to show you a 50-second trailer of the game itself so that you can have a better grasp of how it works. So getting to the rules of the game, we wanted to keep them simple, as simple was the overall design that we wanted to have for the game. So 4 basic rules that were already explained in this video. Goal of the game is to place the tiles in the right color slots. The trick is that each player controls just one area of the game, so you end up passing tiles between the different areas. Whenever you pass a tile, another player actually gets in control of that tile. Just 1/5 special tile in order to undo the mistakes and having, in order to fulfill the goal, as I said, of filling all the stages all the slots in the central grid in order to complete the level. The installation in Beijing worked. We realized that people were actually spending a lot of time playing the game without even realizing actually how much time they were spending, which we found was a very interesting feature of the game. And the idea of trying to overcome that language barrier kind of worked too, because we ended up actually playing with super young Chinese children that we had no way to communicate with, but they perfectly got the goal of the game. Just a few more words about CAUN. The fact was that we managed to turn bugs that, of course, came up at some point into variations or modifiers, as we call them, in the final design of the game. Like, for instance, at a certain point, there was this bug about people not being able to pass tiles like counterclockwise for some reason, and we thought, oh, this could be a very nice feature for the game, actually, so let's add some variations and power-ups and kind of modifiers that change the rules of the game from time to time, and we came up with 12 different variations like this, which definitely added some more emotion to the game design itself. Claudia designed these masks, again inspired by Beijing Opera masks that represent these modifiers in the game, and try to organize everything into some sort of concept levels that have different mechanics aside from the main one. So to wrap up with this CUN-focused part, we managed to turn the story, which was usually what our main goal when making games, into a cooperative experience, overcoming, again, the language by means of abstraction and this overall subtle mood, and again, bugs that we luckily turned into gameplay variations, all in the name of one keyword that we realized that somehow was inspiring all our work while actually making the game. That was this one, simplicity. And of course, the word of simplicity made us think about a work that Claudia is going to speak about now.
Sorry, I'm too short. Okay. Talking about simplicity, our background is not actually coming from straight game design. We are actually first designers. We come from product and other parts of the design industry. And during our studies, we came across the work of John Maeda, who is an American designer and technologist, who is also a bright mind, who works a lot in trying to get interactive experience and turn them into artistic techniques. So he made this manifesto that is called The Laws of Simplicity, and some of the words that you saw before were some of the concepts that Maeda promotes. We tried to, and I'm going to go one by one to each of these laws, we tried to associate to any of these laws a game that we felt that somehow was actually fulfilling what Maeda was actually trying to convey with his manifesto. So we tried to make our games of simplicity kind of glossary that could always kind of help us to design next project in a better way. So we want to share this with you. So we said already that in our game we try to reduce complexity, and this is one of the laws that Maeda says. The simplest way to achieve simplicity is through thoughtful reduction. When reducing, we aim to find an equilibrium between how much can something be simple towards how much do we want it complex. This is something that we face most of the time when we are actually making a game. In reducing, you must apply what Maeda calls the SHE pattern, SHE, which is shrink, hide, and embody. And when we wanted to find a game that was actually giving us back this kind of concept, we thought that the best example is actually desert golfing. It's where reduction is applied to its basic elements. You play golf in the desert, and this SHE concept that is like shrink, applied this Maeda's concept is actually, you can see it immediately from the game design documents that the developer designed. So it's very simple and straightforward. Then we looked into organize, and Maeda says when you are designing something, organization makes a system of many appear fewer. And this comes again with another pattern that he draws, that it's a SLIP system, which is sort, label, integrate, and prioritize. We give a lot of thought of what kind of game so far has been made that could actually give us back this kind of well-organized system. And we ended up thinking that organization can transform complexity into a unique work, which, for example, like in Line Wobbler, you can see how complexity has been turned into a monodimensional experience. And this is a very good example on how information has been organized. Time, it's law number 3, and saving time feels like simplicity. Maeda explained that this law by talking about an equilibrium between how you can make the waiting in a less stressful way and how you can you turn it in a more tolerable experience. We felt again that a game that really stressed this concept, it's Super Hexagon, where, you know, when you think about time, you think that pace and rhythm are important keys, and no better example of this one described below. We briefly with CAU1, we talked about learn and knowledge makes everything simpler. This is Maeda's law number 4. And it talks about learning with this brain acronymus that stands for basic, repeat, avoid, inspire, and never forget to basic, repeat, avoid, and inspire. For basic, we mean like immediately try to give the basic principle of your game or whatever you are designing. Repeating the basic helps the player to actually gain knowledge, and also helping to build like a kind of learning curve. Many games so far do this by a means of tutorial, but we actually thought the even more radical approach and a much more interesting in terms of experimentation is found with promises, where the rule of the game are the narrative rules of this small environment. There are promises that the player has to make to other characters that she sees inside the game, which fits the feature of the game inside its natural and learning environment. Law number 5 is differences. Simplicity and complexity need each other. Nobody wants to eat dessert forever. And at some point, even a kid is tired of eating an ice cream 3 times a day. So this means that everybody gets tired of simplicity at some point. So to work, an environment must swing between complexity and simplicity. And for us, a game that it's a perfect equilibrium between this kind of swing is Reigns, where the simple game mechanic is challenged by the complexity of the system that you have to manage through the narrative. Law number 6 is context. What lies in the periphery of simplicity is definitely not peripheral, which means that the empty parts of your game are just as important to design as the full ones. Simogo with Split provides a very interesting example of this. I would encourage you to try this game because it does fit the law. Law number 7, number 5, sorry, confused. Emotions. Till now, we just see how the laws actually focuses on the concept of less is more, reducing, organizing, subtracting. But when it comes to emotion, more emotions are of course better than less. And a delicate example about this emotion, it's given by trees, where the feel of the game it's added by those little faces that you can see underneath the cards, which, you know, where they could be left like this. It's just like something that the designer added. It wouldn't be necessarily at all, but actually the designer spent a lot of time, and his devlog is expressing through a number of different emails that he exchanged with the visual designer, how he really wanted to convey this emotion through the design of these cards. Law number 8 is trust. In simplicity with trust. Things with one bottom, it inspires us trust. So before smartphones, even horrible video games made a hit in Japan because of the fact that they were controlled by just one single key. And those games were the so-called bottom 5 games. People feel reassured when they have to deal with a minimal mechanics effort, even when the game could be hectic and hard, as for example, Cannibal, when you have to master the pace of the game. So having a key, it's essential. And law number 9 is failure. Some things can never be made simple. And being games an hybrid between art and design and mechanics, they can beautifully tackle the notion of failure and the impossibility of making complexity simple. Thinking of the concept of absolute knowledge that Borges faced actually in his Library of Bible idea, an imaginary library that holds every kind of knowledge and every kind of book written and to be written. Even Notaros tried to make a concept and tried to reproduce this amazing environment with a procedurally generated library that always feeds more book. And again, this is a very nice example that swings between art, concept art, and video game. Last law, final law, it's the one, which it's a kind of sum up that Maeda gives to all the designers about any kind of branch of design. Simplicity is about subtracting the obvious and adding the meaningful. And we think that this place, like here at the Maze, there is a very great pool of examples that really fit the actual laws of Maeda. So just to sum up, those are the laws, and we really hope that if you have examples and if you want to dig into the laws of Maeda's books and you want to share your ideas about which one are the games that can fit this law, it would be nice to receive your inputs and trying to make this talk grow and bigger.